Zelensky Bad News. For what reason the United States will determine the future of Ukraine. News from the front and the wider world appeared better than perhaps any week since the recapture of Kherson in November, as Ukraine celebrated its 32nd national holiday since regaining independence. The front lines advanced by a few miles in Zaporizhia. For the first time since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukrainian commandos briefly planted their yellow and blue flag on the peninsula. This followed a missile strike that destroyed a Russian S-400 anti-aircraft complex. A Russian Mi-8 helicopter pilot smuggled jet engine parts into Ukraine after defecting. Nearly nightly waves of drone strikes deep inside Russia repeatedly hit central Moscow, destroying 2 Tu-22M long-range bombers and 4 Il-78 transport aircraft. Only 44% of voters think Congress should approve new funds for Ukraine. Vladimir Putin was forced to attend the BRICS summit in South Africa via video link after he was prevented from attending in person due to an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court. Kyiv has received 73 F-16 fighter jets thanks to an announced transfer from the Netherlands, Norway, and Denmark. A failed Russian unmanned moon landing was overshadowed by a successful Indian mission. A plane carrying Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin and the entire mercenary group's leadership exploded north of Moscow, leaving no survivors. This was the most high-profile attack of the week for Russia, and it was carried out against its own side. So it's not surprising that many Ukrainians dared to believe the war was turning in their favor. We're finally getting some breaks. It feels like victory will come soon, my Ukrainian artist friend said to me via video call as he strolled past a display of wrecked Russian armor laid out along Kyiv's main boulevard. Prigozhin's apparent murder confirms that a new stage has begun in Russia's domestic policy. A time of troubles, said Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky. He also claims that breaking through to the Crimean border will cause a military collapse in Russia, meaning that Ukraine will not have to take back every kilometer with blood. It will all be over as suddenly as it began, in an instant. Perhaps. However, for the time being, Kyiv's allies, primarily the Americans, supply the quantity and quality of weapons that determine the rate of Ukraine's advance. The political sky over Washington, D.C. is getting darker, which bodes ill for Kyiv. Less than 45% of Americans, according to a recent CNN poll, think Congress should authorize more funding for Ukraine, while 55% want it to stop. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has said he will end the conflict within 24 hours if elected president. Last month, when he was pressed for details, he disclosed his strategy. Tell Zelensky, no more, you gotta make a deal, and Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're gonna give them a lot. We're going to give them a lot more than they had before. This is the type of land for peace deal that Zelensky has consistently opposed. Vivek Ramaswamy, a pharmaceutical billionaire and Trump's main Republican challenger, and potential running mate, shares Trump's skepticism of Ukraine. His proposal calls for Putin to end Russia's alliance with China in exchange for Moscow keeping large swaths of Ukraine. What about the Democrats? Kyiv has had the unwavering backing of Vice President Joe Biden and his administration. U.S. support is something the president has pledged to never give up on more than once in the past week. To date, he has successfully pushed through Congress $135 billion in military and economic aid. Although Biden has publicly advocated for arming Ukraine so that they can fight on the battlefield and be in the strongest possible position at the negotiating table, this is not the position he has taken. Zelensky's stated goal of regaining all of his lost territories is a long way from that. While European support for maintaining arms supplies to Ukraine is higher, it is declining. The Alternative for Germany, AfD, Germany's second most popular party, is opposed to the continuation of the war. Hungary, Austria, Croatia, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Slovakia, and Greece have all voiced strong opposition to a 4-year, €50 billion EU package of mostly economic and reconstruction aid to Ukraine. Even staunch allies of Kyiv, like Poland, want more compensation for their own war-related economic problems. The much-touted commitment of F-16 fighter jets by the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway is not quite the breakthrough it first seemed to be. 40 planes were pledged by the Netherlands, but at least 18 of them are grounded and unusable for anything other than ground training and spare parts. Training Ukrainian pilots and ground crews and deploying the aircraft to the front lines could take up to 18 months. When compared to the United States, Europe's contribution to military aid is negligible. For example, the United Kingdom has contributed less than 5% of the United States' total arms aid to Ukraine, $4.6 billion. The United States is the make-or-break location for a Ukrainian victory. Putin's obvious strategy is to hold as much of Ukraine as he can until November 2024, when a new Trump administration is very likely to be elected. I don't understand why Putin would end his invasion until he knows the outcome of the U.S. presidential election, said Michael McFaul, Barack Obama's chief Russia advisor and former ambassador to Moscow. Tell me how you intend to convince him to start talking now. Putin will only negotiate before then if Russia suffers a humiliating, comprehensive, and decisive military defeat or economic collapse.